The heavy oak doors groaned as I pushed them open, the sound echoing through the marble hall like a warning bell. Every head in the courtroom turned, but I kept my eyes forward, refusing to let their stares slow my steps. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heart pound in your ears. I could feel the weight of every gaze, but none pressed heavier than those of my own family, seated in the front row, their faces a tableau of disbelief and dread. My father's hand, always so steady, trembled as he gripped the armrest. His face, usually ruddy with the confidence of a man who'd built his life on certainty, had gone ashen. My mother, regal and composed even in the most trying times, looked as if the very breath had been stolen from her lungs. Her lips parted, but no sound came out, just a silent gasp, a mother's heart breaking in real time. My brother, younger, by 3 years but always the bolder of us, shrank into himself, his bravado dissolving as our eyes met. He looked away, unable to hold my gaze, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might shatter his own teeth. And then there was my wife, Anna. She sat at the end of the row, her hands folded in her lap, knuckles white. For a moment she tried to meet my eyes, but the effort was too much. Her face crumpled, and before anyone could reach her, she slumped forward, her body folding in on itself like a marionette with its strings cut. The bailiff rushed to her side, but the damage was done. A hush fell over the room, the kind that follows a tragedy no one can quite process. I paused, just for a heartbeat, letting the moment settle. I wanted them to see me, really see me, not as the man they thought they'd broken, but as someone who had survived the storm they'd unleashed. I could feel the questions swirling in. The air, unspoken but urgent. Why was I here? What did I know? What would I do next? The judge's gavel struck, snapping everyone back to attention. I walked to my seat, every step measured, every movement deliberate. I could sense the whispers starting up again, a low hum of speculation and fear. The prosecution glanced at me, their confidence faltering. The defense shifted uncomfortably, as if my presence alone had tilted the scales. I sat down, my back straight, my hands folded neatly on the table before me. I could feel the eyes of the jury, searching my face for answers, for any sign of guilt or innocence. But I gave them nothing. Not yet. This was my moment, and I would not let it slip away. Across the aisle, my parents huddled together, their world unraveling before them. My brother stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched, his breath coming in shallow bursts. Anna was being helped from the room, her face hidden behind a curtain of hair, her sobs muffled but unmistakable. I watched her go, a part of me aching to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be all right. But I knew better. Some wounds run too deep for easy words. The judge called for order, his voice stern but weary. I glanced at the clock above his head, the second hand ticking away the last moments of the life I'd known. I wondered if anyone else could feel it, the sense that everything was about to change, that the truth, once revealed, would leave none of us untouched. I looked around the room, at the faces twisted in curiosity, pity, and fear. I wondered what stories they'd tell about this day, about the man who walked into the courtroom and turned his family's world upside down. I wondered if they'd ever understand the cost of betrayal, the price of secrets kept too long. As the proceedings began, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. I was not the villain in their story, nor the victim. I was something else entirely, a man who had lost everything, and in losing it had found a strength he never knew he possessed. The courtroom doors closed behind me with a final echoing thud. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, I would face it head on, with my eyes wide open and my heart unguarded. The world was watching, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to be seen. There was a time, not so long ago, when I believed my family was unbreakable. We were the kind of people who filled photo albums with laughter, who gathered around the dinner table every Sunday, passing stories and secrets along with the mashed potatoes. My father, a man of few words but strong convictions, presided at the head of the table, his presence a silent reassurance that everything was as it should be. He had built our home with his own hands, brick by brick, and I always thought the walls he raised would keep us safe from the world outside. My mother was the heart of our family, her warmth radiating through every room. She had a way of making even the most ordinary days feel special, a fresh bouquet on the kitchen table, a favorite song humming from the radio, the smell of cinnamon and sugar drifting from the oven. She believed in traditions, in the power of small rituals to bind us together. I can still see her hands, gentle but capable, smoothing the tablecloth before a meal, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear when she thought no one was looking. My brother Daniel was the spark that kept things lively. 3 years younger, he was always chasing after the next adventure, dragging me along whether I wanted to go or not. He had a laugh that could fill a room, and a stubborn streak that matched my own. We fought as brothers do, but there was an unspoken understanding between us, a loyalty forged in childhood, tested by time but never truly broken. Or so I thought. And then there was Anna, my wife. The first time I saw her, she was standing in the rain outside a bookstore, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her eyes bright with mischief. She brought color into my life, a sense of possibility I hadn't known I was missing. Our marriage was built on late-night conversations and shared dreams, on the quiet comfort of knowing someone would always be there to hold your hand when the world felt too heavy. She fit into my family as if she'd always belonged, her laughter mingling with my mother's, her opinions sparking debates with my father that left us all smiling. On the surface, we were the picture of contentment. Our home was filled with sounds of life, clinking glasses, footsteps on the stairs, the low hum of voices drifting through the halls. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries with gusto, our living room crowded with friends and neighbors, the air thick with the scent of roasting meat and the promise of another year together. Even our arguments seemed harmless, the kind that ended with a hug or a shared joke, the kind that made you believe nothing could ever truly come between you. But beneath the laughter, there were shadows. Moments when my father's gaze lingered a little too long on Daniel, pride and disappointment warring in his eyes. Times when my mother's smile faltered, her hands twisting in her lap, as if she were holding back words she couldn't bear to speak. Anna, too, had her secrets, nights when she lay awake beside me, her breathing shallow, her thoughts a million miles away. I told myself it was nothing, that every family had its silences, its hidden corners. I believed that love was enough to bridge any distance, to heal any wound. Looking back, I see the cracks that were already forming, the fault lines running beneath our feet. I remember the way Daniel's laughter sometimes sounded forced, the way Anna's eyes darted away when I asked about her day. I remember my own restlessness, the sense that something was slipping through my fingers, even as I tried to hold on tighter. We were all playing our parts, clinging to the illusion of harmony, afraid to admit how fragile it really was. If I had known what was coming, would I have done anything differently? Would I have asked harder questions, listened more closely, held my loved ones a little tighter? Or was the storm always inevitable, waiting just beyond the horizon, gathering strength while we pretended not to see the clouds? I suppose I'll never know. All I have now are memories of laughter, of love, of a family that seemed for a while to have everything. It's strange how the smallest things can unsettle you, how a single glance or a half-finished sentence can echo in your mind long after the moment has passed. Looking back, I can trace the first seeds of betrayal to a series of seemingly insignificant incidents, each one a pebble dropped into the still water of our lives, sending ripples I tried my best to ignore. It began with whispers. I'd walk into a room and find my father and Daniel huddled together, their voices low, their faces tense. They'd fall silent the moment I appeared, exchanging quick glances before offering me brittle smiles. "Just talking about the business," my father would say, waving me off as if I'd interrupted nothing more than a discussion about the weather. But I could feel the shift in the air, the way their words hung between us like a secret I wasn't meant to hear. Anna, too, became more distant. She started working late, her phone always just out of reach, her explanations vague. "It's just a busy season," she'd say, pressing a kiss to my cheek before slipping out the door. I wanted to believe her, to trust in the easy intimacy we'd always shared. But doubt crept in like a draft through a cracked window. I'd find her staring out the kitchen window, lost in thought, her fingers tracing patterns on the glass. When I asked what was wrong, she'd smile and shake her head, insisting everything was fine. But her eyes told a different story, one of worry, of guilt, of something left unsaid. There were other signs, too. My mother's sudden silences at dinner, her gaze fixed on her plate as the rest of us made small talk. The way Daniel avoided my questions, his answers clipped and defensive. The laughter that once filled our home grew strained, replaced by a tension that seemed to thicken with every passing day. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that every family goes through rough patches, that stress and fatigue could explain the distance growing between us. But the unease gnawed at me. I started noticing things I'd once overlooked. A missed call on Anna's phone from a number I didn't recognize. A hastily closed laptop when I entered the room. The way my father's voice would drop to a whisper when he thought I wasn't listening. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into innocent coincidences. But the feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, I came home earlier than expected and found Anna in the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't hear me at first, her voice low and urgent. "No, he doesn't know. I'll handle it, just trust me." When she saw me, she jumped, her face flushing as she ended the call. "Just work," she said, forcing a smile. I wanted to believe her, to let the matter drop, but the words echoed in my mind long after she'd left the room. Daniel, once my confidant, became a stranger. He stopped inviting me out for drinks, stopped sharing the little victories and frustrations of his day. When I tried to reach out, he'd brush me off, claiming he was busy or tired. I caught him once late at night, pacing the backyard with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp and anxious. When I called out to him, he ended the call abruptly and muttered something about a friend in trouble. I nodded, pretending to accept his explanation, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Even my parents, who had always been the anchors of our family, seemed adrift. My father grew more irritable, snapping at small things, retreating to his study for hours at a time. My mother, once so attentive, seemed distracted, her thoughts elsewhere. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't name. I tried to rationalize my fears, to convince myself that I was imagining things. I told myself that work was stressful, that everyone was just tired, that the distance between us was temporary. I clung to the routines that had always brought us comfort. Family dinners, movie nights, Sunday walks in the park, hoping that if I just held on tightly enough, everything would return to normal. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The foundation of trust that had always held us together was beginning to crack, and no amount of denial could hold back the tide. I lay awake at night, replaying conversations, searching for clues, wondering when exactly the people I loved had started slipping away. The seeds of betrayal had been planted, and though I tried to ignore them, I could feel their roots growing deeper with every passing day. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of night that should have been unremarkable. Rain tapped against the windows, and the house was quiet, except for the low hum of the dishwasher. I remember thinking how peaceful it all seemed, how ordinary. I had come home early, hoping to surprise Anna with her favorite takeout, and maybe reclaim a little of the closeness we'd lost. I set the bags on the kitchen counter, listening for footsteps, for laughter, for any sign that the warmth I remembered was still there. But the house felt empty, hollow, in a way I couldn't explain. I called out, my voice echoing down the hallway, but no one answered. I wandered from room to room, the silence growing heavier with each step. In the living room, Anna's laptop sat open on the coffee table, the screen still glowing. She was always careful with her things, always quick to close her computer when I entered the room. Tonight, though, she must have been in a hurry. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the mouse. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I trusted her, that whatever secrets she kept were her own. But something inside me, some quiet, desperate voice urged me on. I clicked the trackpad and the screen flickered to life. At first, it was just emails. Work messages, reminders, the usual clutter. But then I saw a thread marked, Family Trust Urgent. My heart pounded as I opened it, my eyes scanning the words, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The messages were between Anna, Daniel, and my father. They spoke in careful coded language, but the meaning was unmistakable. They were discussing the transfer of assets, the restructuring of accounts, the need to keep him in the dark until everything is finalized. My name appeared again and again, always as an obstacle, a problem to be managed. I scrolled further, my hands shaking. There were attachments, legal documents, bank statements, signatures that looked like mine but weren't. I saw plans for meetings I hadn't attended, decisions made without me, my role in the family business quietly erased. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I forced myself to keep reading, to see just how deep the betrayal went. It wasn't just Anna. It wasn't just Daniel. It was all of them, my wife, my brother, my father. Even my mother's name appeared, her approval given in a single curt reply. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every late-night phone call, every whispered conversation, every awkward silence suddenly made sense. I was the last to know, the last to understand that the people I loved most had been building a world without me. I sat back, the room spinning. My breath came in short, ragged bursts, my chest tight with disbelief. I tried to tell myself there had to be an explanation, some reason that would make this all less cruel. But the evidence was right there, cold and undeniable. They had conspired to cut me out, to take everything I had helped build, everything I thought we shared. A wave of anger crashed over me, hot and blinding. I wanted to shout, to smash the laptop, to demand answers from the empty house. But beneath the fury was something colder, something that hurt even more, a sense of utter abandonment. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made, every moment I'd put their needs before my own, every time I'd chosen family over ambition, over pride, over self. And for what? To be cast aside, discarded like an afterthought? I stumbled to the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady myself. My mind raced, replaying every memory, every conversation, searching for the moment when love had turned to calculation, when trust had become a weapon. I thought of Anna's gentle touch, Daniel's easy laughter, my father's rare approving nod. Had it all been a lie, or had I simply refused to see the truth? The front door opened and Anna stepped inside, shaking rain from her hair. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile faltered as she took in my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice wary. I wanted to confront her, to lay bare everything I'd discovered, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to say it, not yet. Instead, I watched her move through the room, her every gesture suddenly foreign, every word suspect. I realized, with a kind of numb clarity, that nothing would ever be the same. That night I lay awake, the evidence burning in my mind. I listened to Anna's breathing beside me, steady and oblivious, and wondered how long she had been living this double life. I wondered if she felt any guilt, any regret, or if the person I thought I knew had vanished long ago. By morning, the shock had settled into something harder, something that would not be ignored. I knew what I had to do. The time for denial was over. The truth, once uncovered, could not be buried again. The storm I had sensed for so long was finally here, and I would have to face it alone if I must. But with my eyes wide open, I wish I could say that after that night. I confronted them all at once, demanded answers, and forced the truth into the light. But the reality was far more complicated. The evidence I'd uncovered was only the beginning, a tangled web of deceit that stretched further than I could have imagined. I spent the next days moving through my own home like a stranger, watching, listening, piecing together fragments of conversations and half-truths. Every word, every glance, every silence became a clue. I was no longer just a husband, a son, a brother. I was a detective in my own life, searching for the moment when everything had started to unravel. I began to notice things I'd missed before. Anna's sudden interest in legal documents, her insistence on handling the bills herself. Daniel's nervous energy, the way he avoided my eyes when we spoke. My father's abrupt changes in mood, his growing impatience with even the smallest questions. My mother's quiet sorrow, the way she seemed to shrink into herself, as if she were carrying a burden too heavy to share. I started to wonder if she too was a victim in all of this, or if she had simply chosen silence over confrontation. I found myself replaying old memories, searching for signs I'd overlooked. The family dinners where Anna and Daniel would exchange glances across the table. The late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The sudden trips my father insisted were for business but never quite explained. I remembered the way Anna's hand would tremble when she signed her name, the way Daniel's laughter had lost its warmth, the way my father's eyes would harden when he thought no one was watching. Each memory was a puzzle piece, and as I fit them together, a picture began to emerge, one I wasn't sure I wanted to see. But there was something else, something deeper that I couldn't quite put my finger on, a detail buried in the emails, a name that appeared and disappeared, a transaction that didn't make sense. I spent sleepless nights poring over documents, cross-referencing dates and signatures, following trails that seemed to lead nowhere. The more I searched, the more I realized that the betrayal went beyond money, beyond business, beyond even the bonds of family. There was a secret at the heart of it all, something they were desperate to keep hidden. I remember the moment it clicked, the moment I saw the pattern, the connection that tied everything together. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration. I wanted to confront them, to demand the truth, but I knew I had to be careful. If I moved too soon, I might lose my only chance to expose what they'd done. So I waited, biding my time, gathering evidence, watching as the people I loved continued to play their parts, unaware that I was no longer the fool they believed me to be. There were nights when I almost broke. When the weight of what I knew threatened to crush me, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer I could keep up the charade. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand answers, but I forced myself to stay silent. I needed to know everything before I made my move. I needed to be sure, and so I watched. I listened. I waited. I let them believe I was still in the dark, still oblivious to the storm gathering around me. But inside I was changing. The pain of betrayal was slowly hardening into resolve. I would not let them destroy me. I would not let their secrets remain buried. There is a moment in every story when the truth becomes too heavy to hide, when the lies begin to collapse under their own weight. I could feel that moment approaching, could sense the tension building with every passing day. I knew that when it came, nothing would ever be the same. But I'm not ready to reveal everything just yet. There's more to this story than even I understood at first. Layers of deception. Motives twisted by love and fear. Choices made in the shadows. I've uncovered something that changes everything. Something that explains not just how they betrayed me, but why. It's a secret that will turn this family upside down. A truth that will force us all to face who we really are. You want to know what I found, don't you? You want to understand how a family that seemed so close could fall apart so completely? I promise the answers are coming. But some truths are too powerful to reveal all at once. Stay with me. The real story is just beginning. There is a particular kind of silence that settles in after betrayal. A silence that is not just the absence of sound, but the absence of belonging. It crept into my life slowly at first, like a chill seeping through the cracks of a once warm house. I would wake in the early hours, the world outside still dark, and listen to the emptiness pressing in on all sides. The bed beside me, where Anna once slept curled against my back, felt vast and cold. I would reach out, half asleep, searching for her hand, only to find nothing but rumpled sheets and the echo of a memory. Days blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the last. I moved through the house like a ghost, my footsteps muffled on the thick carpets, my voice swallowed by the high ceilings. The rooms that had once been filled with laughter and light now felt cavernous, haunted by the shadows of what used to be. I would stand in the doorway of the kitchen, watching the dust motes dance in the morning sun, and wonder how everything had changed so quickly, so completely. My family, once the center of my world, became strangers. My father's calls grew infrequent, his tone clipped and formal when he did bother to check in. He spoke to me as if I were a distant acquaintance, someone to be tolerated rather than loved. My mother, always the peacemaker, left voicemails that were little more than apologies wrapped in platitudes. "Give it time," she would say, her voice trembling. "Things will work out. Families always do." But I could hear the doubt beneath her words, the fear that maybe, this time, we had gone too far to find our way back. Daniel avoided me altogether. If we passed each other in the street, he would cross to the other side, his eyes fixed on the ground. I tried reaching out, texts, emails, even a letter slipped under his door, but he never responded. The silence between us grew heavier with each unanswered message, a wall I could not climb. Anna was the hardest to bear. She moved through our home with a careful distance, her eyes never quite meeting mine. We became polite strangers, sharing space but not lives. She would leave early in the morning, return late at night, her presence marked only by the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. Sometimes I would hear her crying behind the bathroom door, her sobs muffled by running water. I wanted to comfort her, to ask her why, to beg for some piece of the truth that might help me understand. But the words caught in my throat, and I let her grief remain her own. I tried to fill the emptiness with routine. Cleaned the house, organized drawers, fixed leaky faucets, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from wandering. I walked for hours through the city, letting the noise and bustle wash over me, hoping to lose myself in the anonymity of the crowd. But even surrounded by people, I felt invisible, as if I had been erased from my own life. Nights were the worst. The darkness seemed to press in, thick and suffocating. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment, searching for the point where it all went wrong. Was it something I said? Something I failed to see? The questions circled endlessly, each one sharper than the last. I began to doubt everything, my judgment, my worth, even my memories. Had I ever truly belonged? Or had I been living in a story I told myself to keep the loneliness at bay? Food lost its taste. Music became noise. The books I once loved gathered dust on the shelves. I stopped answering the phone, stopped opening the curtains, stopped caring about the world outside my door. The isolation became a cocoon, both prison and refuge. I convinced myself that I deserved it, that this was the price I had to pay for trusting too easily, for loving too deeply. But even in the depths of despair, there were moments, brief flickering moments, when I felt something stir inside me, a stubborn ember of hope, A whisper that maybe, just maybe, I was not as alone as I felt. I would catch a glimpse of my reflection in the window, see the lines of pain etched into my face, and wonder if there was still a way back. If I could find meaning in the wreckage, if I could rebuild from the ashes. For now, though, I drifted through my days, untethered and unseen, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. The world had moved on without me, and I was left behind, a solitary figure in a house full of ghosts. The pain was sharp, but it was real, and in its own way, it reminded me that I was still alive, still searching, still hoping against all odds that the story was not yet over. Despair, I learned, is a strange companion. It can hollow you out, leave you numb and drifting, but it can also sharpen your senses, make you hungry for answers. After weeks of wandering through the ruins of my life, I found myself unable to accept the silence any longer. I needed to know why. Why had the people I loved most turned against me? What had I done or failed to do that made me the enemy in my own home? The search began quietly, almost by accident. One morning I found myself in the attic, surrounded by boxes of old photographs and forgotten keepsakes. I was looking for distraction, but what I found was a letter, yellowed with age, tucked inside a book of family recipes. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's, careful and precise. It was addressed to my mother, dated years before I was born. The words were tender, full of hope for the future, but there was a line that caught my eye. We must never let the past come between us. What's done is done. I read it over and over, the meaning just out of reach, a riddle waiting to be solved. That letter was the first thread. I began to pull at it, gently at first, then with growing urgency. I searched through drawers and cabinets, through old files and forgotten boxes. I found more letters, some from my father to my mother, others from my grandfather to my father. They spoke in riddles, in warnings, in promises to protect the family at all costs. There were hints of debts owed, of favors called in, of secrets kept for the sake of appearances. I started to see my family with new eyes. My father, always so stern and unyielding, had been carrying a burden I never understood. My mother, with her quiet strength, had been the keeper of more than just our traditions. She had been the guardian of our family's darkest truths. Even Daniel, reckless and impulsive, had been shaped by forces I never saw. I turned my attention to the business, the family company that had been both our pride and our prison. I requested old financial records, reviewed contracts, and pored over legal documents. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how much had been hidden from me. There were loans taken out in my name, assets transferred without my knowledge, signatures forged with a precision that made my stomach turn. I found evidence of meetings I was never invited to, decisions made behind closed doors, alliances formed in the shadows. It was Anna's involvement that hurt the most. I discovered emails between her and my father, messages that began formally but grew more familiar, more conspiratorial. They discussed my unreliability, my emotional volatility, as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a partner to be trusted. Anna had always been my confidant, the person I turned to when the world felt too heavy. Now I saw that she had been reporting on me, sharing my fears and doubts with the very people who would use them against me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this was not a sudden betrayal, but a slow erosion of trust that had begun long before I noticed. My father had always been wary of outsiders, always insisted that family came first. But somewhere along the way I had become the outsider. My loyalty, my love, my sacrifices, they had all been weighed and found wanting. I confronted my mother first, unable to bear the weight of my discoveries alone. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had once braided my hair and bandaged my scraped knees. I showed her the letters, the documents, the emails. She wept, her hands trembling as she confessed to the secrets she had kept. She spoke of debts owed to old friends, of promises made in desperation, of a fear that the truth would destroy us all. She begged me to forgive her, to understand that she had only ever wanted to protect me. But protection, I realized, can be its own kind of prison. My family had built walls around me, convinced themselves that they were shielding me from harm, when in reality they were keeping me from the truth. I was not a child anymore. I deserved to know the whole story, no matter how painful. I pressed on, determined to uncover every secret, no matter how deeply buried. I confronted Daniel next, cornering him outside his apartment. He tried to deny everything at first, but when I showed him the evidence, he broke down. He admitted to forging my signature, to conspiring with our father, to keeping me in the dark because he was afraid of losing his place in the family, afraid of disappointing our parents. afraid of facing the consequences of his own mistakes. Anna was the last. I waited for her in the living room, the evidence spread out on the coffee table between us. She stared at the papers in silence, her face pale and drawn. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. She told me she had felt trapped, that she had been pressured by my father, that she had convinced herself she was doing what was best for everyone. She apologized over and over, but the words felt hollow, too little and far too late. In the end, the truth was both simpler and more complicated than I had imagined. My family had not set out to destroy me. They had been driven by fear, by pride, by a desperate need to protect themselves and each other. But in their efforts to shield me from pain, they had become the source of it. The conspiracy was not just about money or power. It was about love twisted by fear, about secrets passed down through generations, about the ways we hurt the ones we claimed to protect. I stood in the wreckage of my old life. The truth laid bare before me. I was no longer the man I had been, but I was not yet sure who I would become. All I knew was that the search for truth had changed me, stripped away my illusions, and left me with a choice, to let the past define me or to forge a new path, no matter how uncertain. In the aftermath of revelation, I found myself adrift, battered by the storm of truth I'd uncovered. My family, once my anchor, had become a source of pain and confusion. Yet, as I wandered through the debris of my old life, I discovered that not every bridge had burned, not every door had closed. Sometimes when you least expect it, a hand reaches out from the darkness, a reminder that you are not as alone as you fear. It was a chance encounter that changed the course of my days. I was sitting in a small cafe on the edge of town, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "You always did take your coffee black even when you hated the taste." I turned to see Mr. Harris, my old high school teacher and in many ways the closest thing I'd ever had to a mentor outside my family. His hair was grayer, his frame a little stooped, but his eyes still sparkled with the same quiet intelligence I remembered. He slid into the seat across from me, his presence both comforting and unsettling. For a moment I was a teenager again, seeking his advice on a difficult essay or a problem I couldn't solve. But now the problems were bigger, the wounds deeper. I tried to muster a smile, but it faltered. "It's been a long time," I said, my voice rough with exhaustion. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Too long. I heard about what's been happening. Small towns have big mouths." There was no judgment in his tone, only concern. "You look like you could use a friend." I hesitated, unsure how much to share. But something in his gaze, steady, patient, kind, made it easy to let my guard down. I told him everything, from the first whispers of betrayal to the avalanche of secrets I'd uncovered. He listened without interruption, his hands folded on the table, his expression grave but never pitying. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. "Families are complicated," he said quietly. "We spend our lives trying to live up to their expectations, trying to protect them, trying to forgive them. Sometimes we forget to protect ourselves." His words struck a chord deep within me. I realized how much I had sacrificed in the name of family, how often I had silenced my own needs and doubts for the sake of peace. Mr. Harris reminded me that self-preservation was not selfishness, that it was possible to love others without losing yourself in the process. He offered more than just comfort. He had connections, old friends in the legal world, people who owed him favors. He put me in touch with a lawyer, someone who specialized in family disputes and who, after hearing my story, agreed to help me untangle the legal mess my family had created. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that I might not be powerless after all. But as I found an ally, I also discovered new adversaries. Word of my investigation spread quickly. Old friends became distant, neighbors avoided my gaze, and even casual acquaintances seemed to take sides. Some whispered that I was ungrateful, that I was tearing my family apart for the sake of pride. Others hinted that I must have done something to deserve it, that no one is betrayed without reason. The hardest adversaries, though, were the ones closest to home. My father, once so proud of my achievements, now looked at me with a mixture of anger and disappointment. He accused me of airing our dirty laundry, of betraying the very people who had raised me. Daniel, still raw from our confrontation, refused to speak to me at all. Anna moved through the house like a shadow, her silence a constant reminder of everything we had lost. Yet in the midst of all this, Mr. Harris's support became a lifeline. He called regularly, checking in, offering advice, reminding me to take care of myself. He encouraged me to keep searching for the truth, but also to remember the importance of forgiveness, Not just for others, but for myself. You can't control what they've done, he told me one evening as we walked through the park, the leaves crunching beneath our feet. But you can choose how you respond. You can choose who you become. His words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments when despair threatened to take hold. I began to see that my family's betrayal, as devastating as it was, did not have to define me. I could build something new from the ashes, something stronger and more honest. I could find allies in unexpected places, and I could learn to stand on my own. The road ahead was still uncertain, and the wounds were far from healed. But with Mr. Harris's guidance and the support of those few who believed in me, I began to believe in myself again. I was not alone. I was not defeated. The story was not over, not by a long shot, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to fight for my own future. The day I decided to confront my family, the sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. I remember standing at the window, watching the wind bend the trees, feeling the same tension twisting inside me. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my mind, what I would say, how I would keep my voice steady, how I would demand the truth without letting my anger consume me. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of facing the people I loved, knowing what I now knew. I called them all to the house that evening. My father arrived first, his jaw set, his eyes wary. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just nodded curtly and took his usual seat at the head of the dining table. My mother followed, her hands fluttering nervously at her sides, her gaze darting from me to my father and back again. Daniel came last, shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed, the bravado that once defined him now replaced by a haunted uncertainty. Anna was already there, sitting in the living room, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief in her lap. The silence was suffocating as we gathered around the table. I could feel the weight of years pressing down on us, the shared meals, the laughter, the arguments, the secrets. For a moment I almost lost my resolve, but then I remembered the emails, the forged documents, the lies that had unraveled everything I thought I knew. I took a deep breath and began. "I know what you've done," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. "I know about the accounts, the signatures, the meetings behind my back. I know about the plan to cut me out of the business, to take everything we built together and leave me with nothing." My father's face hardened, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cold. "This was never about you. It was about protecting the family." "Protecting the family," I repeated, my anger rising. "By betraying your own son? By turning my wife and brother against me? By forging my name and lying to my face?" Daniel flinched, his eyes fixed on the table. My mother reached for his hand, but he pulled away, shame written in every line of his body. Anna looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes, but she said nothing. My father leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You were never meant to find out. We were trying to spare you, to keep you from making the same mistakes I did. The business was failing, the debts were piling up. We had to act quickly or we would have lost everything. So you decided to sacrifice me instead?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You decided that I was the problem, that I was expendable?" My mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were scared. We didn't know what else to do. Your father thought it was the only way." I turned to Anna, searching her face for some sign of the woman I had loved. "And you? Was it fear that made you lie to me? Was it love that made you help them steal from me?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I went along with it, I could protect you. I was wrong. I was so wrong." The room was thick with pain, with words left unsaid for too long. I looked at Daniel, my brother, my childhood companion. "Why, Daniel? Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you trust me?" He met my gaze at last, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "I was jealous," he admitted, his voice cracking. "You were always the favorite. Dad always listened to you, always trusted you with the important things. When things started to fall apart, I thought, if I helped him, maybe he'd finally see me. Maybe I'd finally matter." I felt the anger drain out of me, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "You mattered, Daniel. You always did. But you let your jealousy turn you into someone I don't recognize." He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My father stood abruptly, pacing the length of the room. "You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted any of this? I built this family from nothing. I sacrificed everything to give you a better life. And when it all started slipping away, I panicked. I made mistakes, but I did it for you, for all of you." I shook my head, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "You did it for yourself. You did it because you couldn't bear the thought of failing. You taught us to value loyalty, to put family first. But when it mattered most, you chose pride over love. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. My mother wept quietly, her tears a silent apology. Anna reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The hurt too fresh, the wounds too deep. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the mantel, marking the passing of a family's illusions. Finally, I broke the silence. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, any of you, but I needed to hear the truth. I needed to know why. My father stopped pacing, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I'm sorry, he said, the words barely audible. I'm so sorry. Daniel looked up, his face streaked with tears. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could undo it all. Anna sobbed, her voice raw. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Please believe that. I looked at each of them, my heart torn between love and betrayal, between the past and whatever future might still be possible. I don't know what happens next, I said honestly. I don't know if we can fix this, but I won't let your choices define me. I won't let your secrets destroy me. The confrontation left us all raw, exposed, stripped of the lies we'd used to protect ourselves. Old wounds had been reopened, but in their place there was at least the possibility of healing. The truth once spoken could not be unsaid, and as I left the room I felt a strange sense of relief. A weight lifted, a door cracked open. For the first time in a long time I could breathe. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and that, I realized, was enough. The days after the confrontation blurred into one another, a relentless march of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. The house, once a sanctuary, became a war room. My dining table was buried beneath stacks of documents, bank statements, emails, contracts, and letters, each one a fragment of the story I was piecing together. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and anxiety. Every morning I woke with a knot in my stomach, knowing that the fight ahead would demand everything I had left. Mr. Harris's lawyer, sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Grant, became my guide through the labyrinth of legal procedures. She was calm, methodical, and unflinching, her confidence a steadying force in the chaos. You have more than you think, she told me, flipping through the evidence I'd collected. But you need to be prepared. This won't just be about facts. It will be about character, about who the court believes. Are you ready for that? I wanted to say yes, but the truth was I wasn't sure. The thought of facing my family in court, of airing our secrets before strangers, filled me with dread. But I had no choice. They had left me with nothing but the truth, and now I would have to trust that it was enough. Evelyn and I spent hours reviewing every detail. She taught me how to answer questions without flinching, how to keep my composure when the other side tried to twist my words. She warned me that my father's lawyers would be ruthless, that they would try to paint me as unstable, unreliable, unworthy of trust. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made, she said. They'll try to make you doubt yourself. Don't let them, I nodded, swallowing my fear. I thought of Anna, of Daniel, of my parents, of the years I had spent trying to live up to their expectations, to be the son, the husband, the brother they wanted. Now I had to be something else. I had to be my own advocate. The days leading up to the trial were a blur of preparation. I met with Evelyn every morning, rehearsing my testimony, reviewing the evidence, anticipating every possible question. I called in favors from old friends, gathered character references, and tracked down witnesses who could corroborate my story. Each new piece of evidence was a small victory, a reminder that I was not powerless. But the nights were harder. Alone in the quiet, I replayed the confrontation with my family, the pain of their betrayal still fresh. I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if there was still a chance for reconciliation, or if this battle would destroy whatever hope remained. I thought of Anna's tears, Daniel's regret, my mother's sorrow. I thought of my father's pride, the way he had built our family from nothing, and the fear that had driven him to tear it all apart. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to walk away from the fight and let them have what they wanted. But then I would remember the years I had spent sacrificing for them, the trust I had given so freely, the love I had believed was unbreakable. I would remember the feeling of being erased, of having my life rewritten without my consent. And I would find, somewhere deep inside, the resolve to keep going. The day before the trial, Evelyn and I sat in her office, the city lights flickering outside the window. She looked at me, her expression serious. Tomorrow will be hard, she said. You'll hear things that hurt. You'll be tempted to lash out to defend yourself. But remember, this is about the truth. Let it speak for itself, I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I thought of the courtroom, of the judge and the jury, of the strangers who would decide the fate of my family. I thought of the evidence I had gathered, the story I would tell. I thought of the man I had become, the man who had survived betrayal, who had faced his fears, who was ready to fight for his own future. That night I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city's restless hum. I thought of the boy I had been, the man I had tried to be, and the person I was now. I thought of the cost of truth, of the price of justice. I wondered if it would be enough. When morning came, I dressed in my best suit, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar. I looked at myself in the mirror, searching for some sign of the strength I would need. I saw the lines of worry etched into my face, the shadows beneath my eyes, but I also saw something else, a determination that had not been there before. As I left the house, the sky was still gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. I walked to the courthouse, my steps steady, my heart pounding. I thought of everything I had lost and everything I still stood to lose. But I also thought of what I had gained, the knowledge that I could survive, that I could fight, that I could stand on my own. The legal battle was about to begin. The stakes had never been higher, but for the first time I was ready. I would face the truth, no matter how painful. I would fight for my future, for my dignity, for the chance to write my own story. And I would not back down, not now, not ever. The courthouse was a world unto itself, marble floors echoing with hurried footsteps, the low murmur of voices blending with the distant clatter of typewriters and the occasional bark of a bailiff. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of anticipation pressing down on my shoulders. The air was thick with tension, every face in the hallway a mask of anxiety or calculation. I could feel the eyes of my family on me as I entered, their expressions a mixture of defiance, fear, and something else, something like hope, or perhaps desperation. Evelyn met me at the entrance to the courtroom, her briefcase in hand, her gaze sharp and reassuring. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was to come. The truth was, I had spent so long preparing for this moment that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply exist, to breathe without the constant ache of betrayal. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table, the polished wood cool beneath my palms. Across the aisle, my father sat with his lawyer, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched. Daniel was beside him, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Anna sat a few rows back, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her face pale and drawn. My mother, always the peacemaker, looked as if she might dissolve into tears at any moment. The judge entered, and the room rose in unison, the ritual both comforting and terrifying. As we sat, I felt the eyes of the jury on me, searching for some sign of truth or deception. I wondered what they saw, a man wronged, a son betrayed, or simply another litigant in a family squabble gone public. Opening statements began, each side laying out their version of events. My father's lawyer painted a picture of a family in crisis, of difficult decisions made for the greater good. Evelyn countered with calm precision, outlining the evidence of forgery, the secret meetings, the financial sleight of hand. I watched my family's faces as the words washed over them, anger, shame, regret flickering in turn. But beneath the surface, I held something back, a single piece of evidence tucked away in a plain manila envelope, locked in Evelyn's briefcase. It was the result of weeks of digging, of late nights spent poring over records, of a chance discovery that changed everything I thought I knew. I had not told anyone, not even Evelyn, the full extent of what I had found. I needed to be sure, to wait for the right moment, to let the tension build until the truth could no longer be ignored. As the first witnesses were called, I watched the proceedings with a strange sense of detachment. The lawyers sparred over details, the judge intervened, the jury took notes. My father testified, his voice steady but his hands betraying a tremor. He spoke of sacrifice, of duty, of the burden of leadership. Daniel followed, his testimony halting, his guilt barely concealed. Anna was called last, her voice barely above a whisper as she recounted the events that had led us here. Through it all, I remained silent, my mind focused on the envelope in Evelyn's briefcase. I could feel its presence like a heartbeat, a secret waiting to be revealed. I watched my family, searching their faces for any sign that they suspected what I held. But they seemed as lost as I had once been, caught in the web of their own making. During a recess, Evelyn leaned over, her voice barely audible. "You're holding something back," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Is there something I should know?" I hesitated, then nodded. "There's one more thing. Something I found after we finished preparing. I need to wait. The timing has to be right." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Trust your instincts, but don't wait too long. The window for surprises is small." As the trial resumed, the tension in the room grew palpable. The judge's patience was wearing thin. The lawyers more aggressive, the jury more attentive. I could feel the moment approaching, the point at which everything would change. I glanced at the envelope, its edges peeking out from Evelyn's briefcase, and felt a surge of adrenaline. The defense called their final witness, a family friend who spoke in vague generalities, trying to cast doubt on my character. I listened, my jaw clenched, my hands folded tightly in my lap. When it was finally my turn to take the stand, I rose, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. I answered the questions calmly, recounting the events as I remembered them, refusing to be baited by the defense's insinuations. I spoke of trust, of love, of the pain of betrayal. I saw the jury's faces soften, saw the doubt in their eyes begin to fade. And then, as the cross-examination ended, I paused. I looked at the judge, at the jury, at my family. I let the silence stretch, the tension build. I could feel every eye in the room fixed on me, waiting, wondering. "There is one more thing," I said quietly, my voice steady. "A piece of evidence that has not yet been presented. Something that changes everything you think you know about this case." A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, his interest piqued. The lawyers exchanged glances, the jury sat up straighter. My family stared at me, fear and confusion etched into their faces. I did not reveal the contents of the envelope. Not yet. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty, the anticipation, the fear that comes from knowing the truth is just out of reach. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to wait, to wonder, to dread what might come next. As the session ended for the day, I gathered my things, the envelope still safely tucked away. I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on my back as I left, the questions swirling, the tension mounting. The secret was mine for now. But soon the truth would come to light, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The morning of the final hearing dawned gray and heavy, the courthouse looming against the sky like a monument to every secret and lie that had brought us here. I arrived early, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and resolve. The corridors were quieter than usual, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I paused outside the courtroom doors, remembering the first time I'd walked through them, how my parents had gone pale, how Daniel had trembled, how Anna had fainted. I wondered what would happen today, when the last piece of the puzzle was finally revealed. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. The judge sat high on his bench, his expression unreadable. The jury watched me with a kind of wary curiosity, as if they sensed that something important was about to happen. My father sat at the defense table, his face drawn and gray. His hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Daniel looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his bravado stripped away, his eyes darting nervously from me to the judge and back again. Anna sat behind them, her face pale, her hands twisting a tissue in her lap. My mother, always the quiet center of our family, looked as if she might shatter at any moment. Evelyn leaned over, her voice a whisper. "Are you ready?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the envelope in my hand. This was it, the moment I had been moving towards since the night I discovered the truth. The judge called the court to order, his gavel echoing through the room. "Mr. Carter, you may proceed." I stood, my legs unsteady but my voice clear. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to submit new evidence. This document was discovered after the initial filings, and I believe it is critical to understanding the true nature of this case." The judge nodded, motioning me forward. I handed the envelope to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. The judge opened it, his eyes scanning the contents. He looked up, his expression shifting from curiosity to surprise. "This is significant," he said, his voice measured. "Please explain to the court what this is." I took a deep breath, feeling every eye in the room fixed on me. "This is a notarized letter from my grandfather, written shortly before his death. In it, he details the original terms of the family trust, the trust that has been at the center of this dispute. The letter makes it clear that the trust was never meant to be altered without the unanimous consent of all direct heirs. It also includes a confession. My grandfather admits to a mistake made decades ago, a debt that was never repaid, and a promise to protect the family's legacy by ensuring that no one person could ever control it alone." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My father's face went white, his mouth opening and closing as if he were struggling for air. Daniel stared at the table, his hands shaking. Anna covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. My mother let out a soft, broken sob. I continued, my voice steady. "Along with the letter, there are bank records that show a series of unauthorized transfers from the trust to private accounts controlled by my father and later by Daniel. These transfers were made without my knowledge or consent, in direct violation of the trust's terms. The signatures on the authorization forms were forged. I have had them analyzed by a handwriting expert who has provided a sworn affidavit confirming the forgery. The judge examined the documents, his brow furrowed. This is a serious allegation, Mr. Carter. Are you prepared to testify to the authenticity of these records? I am, Your Honor, and I have the expert's affidavit here, as well as additional evidence showing a pattern of deception and concealment that goes back years. My family did not simply act out of fear or desperation. They acted with intent, knowingly violating the law and the wishes of the man who built our family's legacy. The defense attorney rose, his face flushed. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence was not disclosed during discovery. We request a recess to review these documents. The judge nodded. Granted. We will reconvene in 1 hour. As the courtroom emptied, I caught a glimpse of my father, his face crumpling as the reality of what I had revealed sank in. Daniel slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. Anna sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. My mother reached for her, and for a moment the two women clung to each other, united in their grief and shame. During the recess, Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. You did well. This changes everything. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief and sorrow mingling in my chest. I had wanted the truth, but I hadn't anticipated the pain it would cause, not just to me, but to everyone I loved. When we returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was different. The defense attorney was subdued, his arguments half-hearted. The judge listened carefully, his questions pointed. The jury watched with rapt attention as the evidence was presented. The story of my family's betrayal laid bare for all to see. My father was called to the stand. He tried to explain, to justify his actions, but the words rang hollow. The judge pressed him, asking about the forged signatures, the unauthorized transfers, the violation of the trust's terms. My father's voice faltered, his confidence crumbling. For the first time I saw him not as the unyielding patriarch, but as a man undone by his own choices. Daniel was next. He admitted to his part in the scheme, his voice shaking with remorse. He spoke of jealousy, of fear, of wanting to prove himself. He apologized not just to the court, but to me, his brother. The words were raw, honest, and for a moment I saw the boy I had grown up with, the brother I had lost. Anna was called last. She wept as she described the pressure she had felt, the guilt that had haunted her. She admitted to her role, to the lies she had told, to the love she still felt for me despite everything. Her testimony was a confession and a plea for forgiveness all at once. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the court, my heart pounding. I did not come here to destroy my family, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I came here because I believe in the truth. I believe that we cannot build a future on lies. I have lost so much, but I have also learned that strength comes not from control or secrecy, but from honesty and love. I hope that in time we can heal, but that healing must begin with the truth. The judge listened, his expression softening. When he delivered his ruling, it was clear and decisive. The trust would be restored, the assets returned, and my family held accountable for their actions. There would be consequences, but also the possibility of redemption. As the gavel fell, I looked at my family, broken, humbled, but perhaps finally free from the weight of secrets. The truth had come at a cost, but it had also set us on a path towards something new. I walked out of the courtroom into the gray afternoon, the air cool and clean, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the promise of hope. The courthouse felt strangely empty after the verdict, as if the echoes of our family's pain had finally faded into silence. I stepped outside into the pale afternoon light, the world moving on around me, indifferent to the storm that had just passed. For a long moment I stood on the steps, breathing in the cool air, letting the reality of what had happened settle over me. The fight was over, but the wounds were still fresh, raw, and aching in ways I hadn't expected. In the days that followed, the house felt different. The tension that had once filled every room was gone, replaced by a quiet that was both peaceful and unsettling. My father retreated to his study, the door closed more often than not. I would hear him moving around late at night, the low murmur of his voice as he spoke on the phone, trying to salvage what he could from the wreckage. He didn't speak to me at first, but one evening as I passed by, he called my name. I paused in the doorway, unsure of what to expect. He looked older, smaller somehow, the weight of his choices etched deep into his face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I thought I was protecting us. I see now that I was only protecting myself." There was nothing I could say to erase the past, but I nodded, accepting the apology for what it was, a first step, however small, towards something like forgiveness. My mother was gentler with her regret. She found me in the kitchen one morning, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "I should have spoken up," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "I should have trusted you more. I hope you can forgive me." I reached for her hand, and for a moment we simply sat together in the quiet, the years of love and disappointment between us softening into something like understanding. Daniel was the hardest to face. He avoided me for days, his shame a wall I couldn't breach. But eventually he knocked on my door, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "I messed up," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I let jealousy get the better of me. I hurt you and I hurt myself. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try to make things right." We stood in awkward silence, the old rivalry between us replaced by something more fragile, an honesty that had been missing for years. I clapped him on the shoulder, and for the first time in a long time we both smiled, tentative but real. Anna and I moved through the house like ghosts, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. There were no easy answers between us, no quick fixes for the damage done. But one evening, as the sun set and the house was bathed in golden light, she found me in the garden, her eyes full of sorrow and hope. "I still love you," she said quietly. "I don't know if that's enough, but it's all I have." I looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman I had loved for so many years. "It's a start," I replied, and for the first time I meant it. The days passed slowly, each one a little easier than the last. We began to talk, to share meals, to remember what it felt like to be a family. There were still arguments, still moments when the old pain flared up. But there was also laughter, tentative and uncertain, but real. We were not healed, not yet, but we were trying. I spent more time outside, walking through the fields, feeling the earth beneath my feet. I thought about the future, about what it might mean to rebuild, not just the business, but the trust that had been broken. I knew it would take time, that there would be setbacks and disappointments, but I also knew that we had survived the worst of it. We had faced the truth and we were still standing. In the quiet moments I found a kind of peace I hadn't known before. The past could not be changed, but the future was still unwritten. We were picking up the pieces one day at a time, learning how to forgive, how to hope, how to begin again. In the weeks after the trial, I found myself waking up with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The weight of secrets and suspicion had been lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar but welcome. A quiet confidence, a belief that I could shape my own future. For so long, I had measured my worth by the approval of others, by my ability to keep the peace, to hold the family together at any cost. Now, standing in the aftermath, I realized that survival was not enough. I wanted to live, to thrive, to reclaim the parts of myself I had set aside for the sake of harmony. I started small. I cleared out my study, sorting through old papers and mementos, letting go of the things that no longer served me. I found forgotten photographs, letters from friends I'd lost touch with, reminders of the man I had been before the world grew so complicated. Each item I kept was a promise to myself, a commitment to remember who I was, and to honor the journey that had brought me here. I began to take better care of myself, both in body and mind. I walked every morning, breathing in the crisp air, feeling my strength return with each step. I cooked meals for myself, savoring the simple pleasure of nourishing my body. I read books that challenged me, listened to music that stirred something deep inside. I allowed myself to feel joy again, to laugh without guilt, to hope without fear. Work became a source of pride rather than anxiety. With the business restored, I approached it with fresh eyes, determined to build something honest and lasting. I reached out to old colleagues, sought advice from mentors, and welcomed new ideas. I learned to trust my instincts, to make decisions without second-guessing myself. For the first time, I felt like a leader, not because I had inherited the role, but because I had earned it. My relationships, too, began to heal. I set boundaries where I needed them, refusing to be drawn back into old patterns of guilt and obligation. I spoke openly with my family, insisting on honesty even when it was uncomfortable. We stumbled, of course, old habits die hard, but each conversation brought us a little closer to understanding, to forgiveness, to something like love. Anna and I moved slowly, careful not to rush what could not be forced. We talked late into the night, sharing our fears and regrets, our hopes for the future. There were tears, but also laughter, and a tenderness that surprised us both. We were not the same people we had been, but perhaps that was a blessing. We had been tested, and though we bore the scars, we were stronger for it. I found myself reaching out to others too, friends I had neglected, neighbors I had barely known. I volunteered at the local community center, offering my time and skills to those who needed them. I discovered that helping others was its own kind of healing, a way to move beyond my own pain and find purpose in connection. Most of all, I learned to trust myself again. I stopped seeking validation from those who could not give it, stopped apologizing for wanting more from life. I embraced my own resilience, my ability to endure and adapt, to find meaning even in the darkest moments. I realized that dignity was not something others could grant or take away. It was something I carried within me, a quiet strength that no betrayal could destroy. As the seasons changed and the world moved on, I felt a sense of possibility blooming inside me. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was free to imagine new beginnings, to dream new dreams, to build a life that was truly my own. Standing at the edge of my property one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a surge of gratitude for the pain that had taught me, for the love that had sustained me, for the future that awaited. I was not the man I had been, but I was proud of the man I was becoming. I had survived the storm, and now, at last, I was ready to step into the light. Time, I've learned, is both a healer and a test. In the months that followed the trial, the sharp edges of betrayal softened, replaced by a gentler ache, a reminder of what was lost, but also of what could still be found. Forgiveness did not come all at once. It arrived in small, unexpected moments. A shared smile over breakfast, a quiet apology whispered in the hallway, a hand reaching out when words failed. I began with myself. For so long, I had carried the weight of anger and disappointment, convinced that letting go would mean surrendering my dignity. But as the days passed, I realized that forgiveness was not a gift for those who had hurt me. It was a gift for myself. It was the freedom to move forward, to reclaim my peace, to choose hope over bitterness. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the pain, and then slowly to let it go. With my father, the process was slow and halting. We spoke in fragments at first, circling the truth, each of us afraid to reopen old wounds. But one evening, as we sat together in the fading light, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I was wrong. I see that now. I hope you can forgive me, even if I don't deserve it." I reached for his hand, feeling the tremor in his grip, and nodded. "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can choose what we do with what's left." In that moment, something shifted between us, a bridge rebuilt, however fragile. My mother's forgiveness was quieter, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. She showed it in the meals she cooked, the gentle way she listened, the patience she offered when I faltered. She never asked for absolution, but I gave it freely. Grateful for her steadfast love, for her willingness to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. Daniel and I found our way back to each other through shared work and laughter. We rebuilt trust one conversation at a time, learning to be honest about our fears and jealousies. There were setbacks, moments when old resentments threatened to resurface, but we faced them together, determined not to let the past define us. I forgave him, not because he had earned it, but because I wanted a brother more than I wanted to be right. Anna and I moved forward with caution and care. We talked openly about our mistakes, our regrets, and our hopes. There were days when the pain felt too fresh, when forgiveness seemed impossible. But we kept trying, choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. In time, love returned, not as it was before, but as something deeper, more resilient, shaped by all we had endured. As a family, we learned to live with the scars. We gathered for meals, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through setbacks. We laughed more, argued less, and found comfort in the simple act of being together. Healing was not a destination, but a journey, a daily choice to show up, to listen, to forgive. Looking back, I see that the storm that nearly destroyed us also revealed our strength. We were not perfect, but we were willing to change, to grow, to begin again. I am proud of the family we are becoming, one built not on secrets or fear, but on honesty, compassion, and hope. To anyone listening, I offer this. Forgiveness is not weakness, and healing is not forgetting. It is the courage to face the truth, to let go of what cannot be changed, and to open your heart to what is still possible. No matter how broken things may seem, there is always a way forward. There is always hope. And so, as the seasons turn and life moves on, I choose to forgive. I choose to heal. I choose to believe that together, we can build something new, something stronger, kinder, and more true than what came before.